Hello. Before the video starts, I recommend subscribing to my channel and turning on the bell so you don't miss new exciting stories. The heat outside seemed to melt even the asphalt, the wheels became too soft, and the road went in strange waves. Yaroslav was sitting in the car, squinting at the pleasant cooling breeze coming from the air conditioner. Once the man could not even imagine that he would have such a nice, comfortable car, that his name would be one of the famous ones in the city. A smile appeared on Yaroslav's lips. The man looked at his driver, remembering that at one time he had started from the same bottom, had once been a janitor in a factory, and then managed to get a job as a director's driver. At that time, the position seemed to Yaroslav the limit of dreams, and then he suddenly found in his belongings an old diary. Of course, it was not at all like a girl's diary in which the fair sex describe their feelings, spills the secrets of their first unrequited love. More often than not, they do it for someone to read and help them. No, this one was very different. There Yaroslav wrote down his plans, set goals, and as soon as he reached one of them, he immediately strived for the other. But he had forgotten about his old friend. He had not reached him for a long time. And when he opened the diary and saw the little boy's dreams, his plans that he had made in the distant childhood, Yaroslav realized that he was no closer to any of his goals. It was as if he lost faith in himself as he grew up and stopped at what he had achieved. The young man began to work actively, saving every penny for his endeavor. When he quit his job and sold his small apartment, his girlfriend left him, saying that she would never build her future with such a loser. Yaroslav was offended because the person he loved with all his heart did not believe in him. However, after overcoming this, he still moved on and now has achieved all the heights that she had dreamed of before. The girl later tried to go back to him, saying that she was wrong, that she loved and missed him, but Yaroslav did not believe her. He understood that now she was attracted to the money he had, and he didn't need such a girl. Breaking out of the traffic, Yaroslav tried to push the memory of his past life away from him. He got to his destination, and when the driver put the car in the parking lot, he got out of the car. The sun's rays immediately began to burn his skin. Yaroslav grimaced a little, took out his sunglasses to put them on. He tried to hide more from the journalists than from the scorching rays. There must be a lot of journalists today, because Yaroslav was opening another branch of his real estate agency, which gave jobs to many people in the city. And due to his honest work, he managed to win the hearts of many clients. Of course, he would have to give an interview, but Yaroslav planned that it would happen a little later, because first he had to make sure that everything was all right and was going strictly according to plan. The man did not like to deviate from the plan and believed that if he moved a little in the wrong direction, everything would surely go wrong. Casting a glance at the festive arch of balloons, Yaroslav smiled. He liked the design and the color style of the agency's logo. The man looked carefully at the neon signboard, and ducking into the building, he heard the pleasant sound of doorbells above his head. Employees dressed smartly and with sincere smiles on their faces immediately rushed to their boss and began to tell him what they had already accomplished. It was not at all a case where employees are trying to hide from their boss just to avoid being seen by him. No, Yaroslav was loved and respected by all the employees. They held on to their jobs, because you could not find another boss like him. "You are all good," praised his subordinates Yaroslav. "Keep it up. It would not have been possible without you," suddenly said one of the employees who had been working for a long time and was glad to be transferred to the new branch as a manager. Yaroslav did not argue, realizing that he had a hand in all this. He was pleased that people appreciated what he gave them and tried to work even harder to achieve their goals. After making sure that the buffet was ready, as well as the refreshments for the people who decided to stop by for the opening, Yaroslav smiled. He looked at the baskets with sweets and fruit and imagined how happy the children would be, because usually at the opening a lot of mothers with children came to see them. They all knew that Yaroslav would take care about the children's program to please the little ones. Though the man did not have his own children yet, but he loved children and quite often organized various events for them. Soon music began to play outside. It began. Yaroslav looked outside and saw that the first guests had already begun to gather under the tent in the courtyard. Soon the host came on the stage and started the festive program, followed by the dancers. Yaroslav went out to watch the mesmerizing oriental dancing with everyone else, hoping that the journalists would have a conscience and not bother him with their microphones and cameras. Now the man was watching how skillfully the dancers controlled their bodies performing belly dancing. Yaroslav was offered to choose a more modern dance, performed by young, sultry beauties, but it seemed to him that their frank half-naked bodies would repel people rather than attract their attention. After all, there were quite a few old people who came to condemn such things. And Yaroslav respected old age and wanted all his clients to feel comfortable. And it would hardly be pleasant for the children to look at the women who could see their father in too short shorts. Suddenly, someone yanked the man by the elbow. "Son, I'm ashamed to beg here. Don't judge. Please, fall down on a loaf of bread, and if you don't believe that I want to buy food, then buy it yourself." Yaroslav heard a hoarse voice and turned around. He looked at the poorly dressed grandmother standing next to him. She was short, thin, gray, and wrinkled. She reminded him of a woman from a war movie, heartbroken and unbearable. "Yes, of course," answered Yaroslav and went into his pocket for money. He pulled out a $5,000 bill. On a day like this, he just wanted to trust people, not to check whether the grandmother really wanted to buy bread or just worked for someone, and give the money to the man who was covering it. The man drew the old woman a bill, and when she took the money and began tearfully thanking him, clinging to his hand, Yaroslav was dumbfounded. His gaze was fixed on the woman's earrings. The stones, which had already faded, brought him back for a moment to a distant past. "Where did you get those earrings?" Yaroslav suddenly asked in a worried voice. The woman became suddenly pale and frightened to see the young man standing in front of her. It was as if she was frightened by the question. "I can't sell them, son." She shook her head. Apparently, she had been offered to buy the earrings more than once, since she was so afraid of the question. "I'm not asking you to sell them to me. I simply asked, where did you get them?" Yaroslav repeated his question. "My late husband, may he rest in peace, gave them to me. He made them himself at one time, because it was very difficult to buy jewelry back then. They are exclusive, they are dear to me as a memory. So I cannot sell. Even if I die of hunger, will not sell. I'm not asking for money for myself, son. I could do without food for a long time. But my granddaughter is bedridden, and she suffers without it. She needs care, she needs strength. She's doing her best to get back on her feet." Yaroslav's insides instantly felt cold. He remembered the hardest times of his life. He also remembered Zinaida Mitrofanovna, who was now standing in front of him, asking for alms. Yaroslav was born during the collapse of the Soviet Union. He did not remember those times. All he knew was that it was hard for many people back then. Those who were more cunning bought up everything they could. Plants were falling apart, and many people were out of work. Even though Yaroslav was young, I remember well how his father came home drunk and snapped at him and his mother. He told them to get out of the house, or he would beat them up, that he was not going to drag them on too. Before we continue, a little blurb. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel before you continue, as 98% of viewers watch without a subscription. You can also support the development of the channel with a donation. The link is in the attached comment. The mother took her then still young son by the hand and in tears went wherever she could see. She knew that her husband would not throw words to the wind, for he had often beaten her and her son before. After spending the night on a park bench and feeding the boy with an apple from a tree growing there, the woman did not know where to go, because they had no family. She decided to try to ask her friend for help, to wait until her husband calmed down a little. But when she entered the barracks, she was shocked to find her husband in bed with her best friend. Of course, there was no help at all. She was just laughed at by the drunken people who had once been close to her. Then the woman wept bitterly and accidentally stumbled upon Zinaida Mitrofanovna. She fed the hungry mother and son and gave them shelter in her small house of 2 rooms. Zinaida Mitrofanovna helped Yaroslav's mother to get a job, and the woman was able to get back on her feet thanks to her. It was there that she met a wonderful man who later became Yaroslav's stepfather. The connection with Zinaida Mitrofanovna broke off when the woman was given an apartment and moved there to live. And now she stood in front of Yaroslav and asked him for money for bread, and he knew that he owed her much more. After all, she had once prevented him from dying a starving death. Zinaida Mitrofanovna, Yaroslav asked, wanting to make sure he was not mistaken. He had so often looked at the woman's sergias that had caught his attention so much at once. She had once told me how her husband had made and given her this ornament. That was back when she was a child. And here she was seeing those earrings again. "Do we know each other, son?" The woman was surprised. "Not a word," smiled Yaroslav. "Do you remember how many years ago you sheltered a woman betrayed by her husband with a little son in her arms? That son was me." Zinaida Mitrofanovna sobbed and covered her face with her hands. She shook her head as if she could not believe that it was possible that after all these years she had met the very boy who had helped her look after her newborn granddaughter, because the poor woman's daughter had died during childbirth. The journalists began to surround Yaroslav, asking him questions, but at that moment he did not care at all about them. He often remembered Zinaida Mitrofanovna and her invaluable help, remembering her words that always supported him and helped him move forward. "One day you will reach great heights, my boy. You will be great and famous. And someday, maybe, you will also help someone in trouble," said Zinaida Mitrofanovna. And now Yaroslav has a wonderful chance to repay kindness for kindness. But somehow, imperceptibly for Yaroslav himself, the woman disappeared in the crowd, disappeared when the journalists blocked her. The man tried to find her, but all in vain. Zinaida Mitrofanovna, as if she had fallen through the earth. Yaroslav became angry at being distracted from an important conversation and refused to give an interview. After all, they are like a big family. Yaroslav himself went to the head office. He immediately called his mother and told her about this unexpected meeting. Of course she remembered Zinaida Mitrofanovna. "Son, we need to find her and help her by all means. Without her, we might be at the bottom now, if we lived. It would be a great miracle. God himself pushed you so that we could thank her for her kindness." Yaroslav thought exactly the same, so he started looking for the woman. His mother told him exactly where Zinaida Mitrofanovna was given an apartment. She lamented that she seldom visited her and completely stopped visiting the woman because of the vanity of the world, and should have been there to support her, because Zinaida Mitrofanovna became their family. For several days, Yaroslav was not himself. His people managed to find information that Zinaida Mitrofanovna sold the apartment and no one knew where she moved. They tried to find the last name, but because of bureaucracy, the search moved too slowly. Yaroslav became obsessed with the idea of finding the woman and helping her granddaughter get back on her feet. He remembered this little baby girl who would look at him with her big eyes and begin to whimper. Then Yaroslav was annoyed by the baby's crying, but it remained a pleasant memory in his heart forever. The man often went to his new branch. He hoped to meet Zinaida Mitrofanovna there, but all was in vain. It was as if she had fallen through the earth and never appeared, and Yaroslav had no idea why she had run away, why she had not waited for him and accepted his help. Sometimes he even thought that it was just a passing vision, a figment of his imagination. However, after a couple of weeks, Yaroslav received a phone call that managed to find and finds Zinaida Mitrofanovna, and she lives in a holiday village not far from where she met Yaroslav. She lived poorly in a shack with a leaky roof. Her heart bled. Yaroslav put all business aside and went to the address he had been sent in the message. The man was afraid that Zinaida Mitrofanovna would not want to accept his help, because she had not just run away then. However, as soon as he drove up to the yard, the woman came out on the porch and groaned. She cried when she met Yaroslav. "I never thought, my son, that you would decide to find me and come here. I'm sorry. I have nothing to give you, and there's even no tea left. I used your money to buy flour, yeast, and herbs to make scones with porridge. And I bought medicine for Janachka. She's very weak. She's trying to get up, but it's very difficult, or rather nothing at all. Why did you run away then? I wanted to help you." "I don't know, son," honestly admitted Zinaida Mitrofanovna with a shrug. "I got used to pull everything on my shoulders. No one ever offered to help me. I'm sorry for disappearing. I was afraid." Jaroslav nodded. He had not come here to accuse the old woman and make her feel guilty. "Zinaida Mitrofanovna, what happened to Janachka? Why did she find herself confined to bed?" The woman looked at Yaroslav with pursed lips and her eyes filled with tears, and her chin began to tremble. The old woman sat down on the porch and put her hands around her head. "I will tell you, my son, though I know that there is no justice in this world. I have tried. I have beaten off the doorsteps of courts and police for compensation. I have never achieved it." Zinaida Mitrofanova remembered the terrible events that happened in their lives 5 years ago. Jana was coming home as usual. She had managed to leave work an hour earlier, because it was her grandmother's birthday. It was a warm September evening, and the streets were crowded with people. Jana was followed by a local policeman. He had been paying attention to her for a long time, but she did not like him at all. On top of that, the man was married, and Jana had no intention of destroying someone else's family. She had never considered all these flawed liaisons as something normal. Alexei, on the other hand, wouldn't listen to her denials. That day he was drunk, and when he got involved with Jana, he began to insist on the girl's attention. He promised her a mountain of gold. He said she would be like a stone wall with him, but she only needed a protector to protect her from the district officer's intrusions. Alexei followed Yana into her apartment building. She was very frightened, but tried not to show it, calmly spoke to the man, and tried to explain to him why nothing could happen between them. That's when he got angry and attacked her. The doors in the apartments were too muffled, and most of the residents were elderly and already hard of hearing. No one heard the young woman's screams as Alexei raped her. After breaking free from his grasp, Yana stumbled and rolled over the stairs. My granddaughter was in the intensive care unit for several weeks, taking a long time to heal. We tried to put the bastard away, but he denied everything. He accused my little girl of offering herself up. Thanks to acquaintances, Alexei remained innocent, and we didn't get any compensation. At that time, we were ready to accept money because my little girl needed an expensive urgent spine operation, and that's when I got the idea. Zinaida Mitrofanovna returned from hospital with a heavy heart. She did not know where to get money for the surgery, but she could not leave her granddaughter lying there either. Then she remembered a small dacha that her neighbor offered her for a mere penny. If you make some kind of repair there, you can live at least all year round. Zinaida Mitrofanovna immediately called her neighbor and arranged to see the dacha. When she walked in, her first thought was to run away. The only reason there were no cockroaches was because there was nothing to eat, and they would never live in such conditions. However, the woman remembered her granddaughter and agreed. She sold her apartment, bought a dacha, and used the money left over to pay for Jana's surgery. Doctors said that the surgery was successful, but there was no improvement in Yana. Then Zinaida Mitrofanovna went to another doctor together with her granddaughter. After numerous examinations, he claimed the surgery was unsuccessful, but the doctors tried to cover up their mistakes. I tried, my son. I tried to get justice, at least there. I had a report that they had made a mistake, but nothing came out there either. Everything was taken care of. They blamed me. They set all the dogs on me. They said I just wanted to have another operation for free. Zinaida Mitrofanovna sighed heavily. So my granddaughter and I stayed in this hovel, which was crumbling more and more every year. Janachka began to receive a disability pension. What are these kopecks? Together with mine, we only enough to buy medicine and a little to buy food. We have to ask for alms, though it's alien to me. It's hard to walk up to someone with an outstretched hand every time. But what can't you do for your granddaughter? She and I are the only ones in the whole world. And so it turned out that Janachka was lying there, trying to get up, screaming in pain, falling down and crying. She cries a long time because of her helplessness, and then she tries to get up again. But it is harmful because the spine is already too weak. Yaroslav listened to the story of Zinaida Mitrofanovna silently, but he constantly clenched his hands into fists and wanted to punish all guilty. He decided that he would definitely get justice, even if it was years later. And he would make the district officer sit on the stake, and in the hospital he would make such a racket that all the guilty would have their heads blown off. If they made a mistake, they had to do it all over again. Don't worry, Zinaida Mitrofanovna. Now you have me, and I'll help you. You helped us, now it's my turn to return the favor, assured Jaroslav. Thank you, son. I'll owe you for the rest of my life, though my life will be very short. I've already lived my life. I'm afraid of how Janachka will be without me. I don't pay attention to my illnesses, I only worry about my girl. Yaroslav entered the house to get acquainted with Yana. The woman was afraid to look into his eyes for a long time, and when she did, she mentally returned to the distant past. Then she looked at him with the same large green eyes, but she was lying in a cradle, and now she is chained to the bed. Zinaida Mitrofanovna told her granddaughter everything from the beginning. How she met Yaroslav, his mother, and how she met him now. The woman was pained to hear that her grandmother had to beg for alms. Jana wiped away her tears and promised that one day she would get back on her feet and make sure that her beloved grandmother would not need anything anymore. Upon returning home, Yaroslav immediately called all his acquaintances and began arranging for them to handle the case of Jana and the rapist, who was still walking around contentedly. Yaroslav could not stand people like that, and he desperately wanted justice to be done. He called his good acquaintance, a surgeon, whom not long ago his agency was looking for a house to buy. Yaroslav found out everything that would have to be done for Jana's surgery. The very next day, the young woman was taken to the hospital where they began to prepare her for the operation. Zinaida Mitrofanovna thanked Yaroslav tirelessly, kept crying, and saying that without him she would have never made it. The heads of those who had made the first operation flew wrong from the first day. Yaroslav's lawyers had only drawn up an application to court as the head doctor of the hospital began internal proceedings in an attempt to find the culprits and punish them. It should be noted that he also had a nose for it, so the lawyers did not back down and demanded the punishment they deserved for everyone. They caught Alexei in a dark alley and taught him a good lesson by counting every bone in his body for what he had done to the girl. He was intimidated so badly that he was forced to run to the police with a clean confession, and soon he lost all his powers and ended up in prison, where he was welcomed by those whom he had once detained or set up. Sweet life to the man certainly did not shine in the next 5 years. Yaroslav bought for Zinaida Mitrofanovna a cozy, new house, using the services of its new branch of the real estate agency, which just happened to have a lot of interesting options. The woman was sobbing, and Jaroslav actively tried to convince her that it was all her merit, that without her he could now serve time in jail somewhere for theft, but not to sit in the boss's chair and not have so much money. The man's mother came and helped the woman move into her new home while her granddaughter was in the hospital. Jana's surgery was successful, and the young woman had normal sensation in her extremities for the first time in years. She tried to follow the doctor's recommendations, and she even wanted to begin intensive training as soon as possible. But she did not do so knowing that the load should be increased gradually. Yaroslav bought a wheelchair for Yana so that she could use it at first, and she was very grateful to the man for such help and support. A year later, Jana started to take confident steps and could do without the wheelchair for a long time. Yaroslav became a frequent guest at Zinaida Mitrofanovna's house, and unnoticeably he developed warm feelings toward Yana. She charmed the man, and he dared to propose to her to start going out with her. Yana had nothing against it, because she liked Yaroslav as a person. He had a huge, kind heart. This was the kind of man she had dreamed of, the kind of man she had waited for years. Thanks for watching. I'll be happy to see you in the comments. Also subscribe to the channel. See you.